Hello, and welcome to our Best of 2023, one of the videos and projects that I look forward to every year. That is, of course, our top 10 games of 2023. Now, you may notice that this is going to look and feel and just overall be a little bit different than all of our previous videos. I'm trying a new setup, a new method of recording, a whole new, hopefully this will look better and come out better. I'm trying to increase the production value a little bit, so definitely looking forward to what you guys think of this one. I'm going to do my absolute best to not hit my mic throughout this because I like to talk with my hands a lot and I'm worried about hitting this, and I haven't had the mic this close in my videos before. So I'm definitely looking forward to this one. This is a video and an article that is literally a year in the making. There are hundreds of hours put into games specifically with in mind knowing that I'm going to eventually make a top 10 list. So I'm very excited about this one. I've been really enjoying the best of 2023 events so far as we've been doing all these community polls. I'm really mad at myself because I realized that we put out the first few winners and I had the wrong watermark. It just goes to show that all the planning, all the effort, all of the stuff that goes into making these events, we're still going to have like these little errors and it's going to annoy me. So yeah, I used the wrong watermark on one of a couple of the videos, but I'm going to get it fixed. And I have it updated for this video as well. I'm really excited for this. I was hoping to do a full like state of gaming, get some panelists on this, but I think I was just like, no, I want to try out this new recording method. I'm just using a new setup that hopefully will be a little better and improve that production quality. So I was just going to do this one solo, and I hope that y'all won't get tired of me talking on this one. This video is actually going to be in tandem with our major article that we do. So, part of the Best of 2023 event, we're going to be having the top 10 games article drop simultaneously and alongside this video. So, if you don't want to watch the whole video, you can just click on the article. It's going to be in a link on YouTube in the comments below, and you can just read the article version of this video. And some of you who have watched me on Instagram or on YouTube, you may have seen that I'm in a different shirt than I normally am. So before we get into the video, I just want to point that out. Normally I wear my Game Infinite shirt. I'm wearing a little bit different. I got Godzilla here. And that's because I wanted to take a few minutes to just give a quick shout out to one of our partners, Ice-T Aesthetics. They have a lot of really cool nerdy and anime merch and apparel, and you can actually use code Game Infinite on their website. I'll be putting the link down in the description below to save on their amazing merch and help support our platform. So quick shout out to them when they rock one of their merch in our biggest video of the year. So I want to say a huge thank you to them for their support of our platform, and we're going to dive into the video. Let's dive right into the top 10 games of 2023. Now, I'm really excited about this video because, like I said, it is something that is a year in the making, and I put a lot of pressure on myself because there's a lot of peer pressure in building this video and this article because Game Infinite is one of thousands of other outlets that do this kind of thing, and because this is my list, it is literally the games that I played. There's always these one or two games where like they weren't on my radar or they didn't immediately appeal to them, but everyone else is just praising them so much that I feel kind of pressured into playing them. Or there's sometimes games that it's like if I don't like it but everyone else does, there's so much like pressure that goes into like picking games that you think people expect to be on these lists. And sometimes I just have to push back on that and pick the games I want to pick and just say that this is my list. These are the games that spoke to me that I really liked. This list is going to be this list is going to be missing some really big titles that I think a lot of people are going to be like, how did you not have that game on your list, or how did you not pick that for number one? That's great. If you have a game that's missing from my list, please put it down in the comments. Let me know what your favorite games are. And I also think that my list is going to be more unique than a lot of the top 10 lists you're going to see out there, as a lot of these lists had games that didn't speak to me, but also I have games on my list that you're not going to see on a lot of others. So I think this one might be a little bit more unique. So hopefully that gives you some new games to try out. So I'm really excited about this one. So one of the things that I wanted to point out is just how difficult it was to make this list this year, because 2023 has been called by so many outlets to be one of the best game years we've had in recent years, one of the best years in gaming. And I really do agree with that. We have had so many just 10 out of 10 game of the year worthy games, that there were so many really amazing games that were massive that there were some that I didn't even get to try. But the ones that I did play, the ones that did speak to me, were just fantastic. So I did want to point out that this was an overly competitive year. I could have easily made this a top 20 list because there were just as many games that I played and loved that did not make this list. And also because of that, it was the first year I didn't do a top 10 indie list. I always do an indie list because indie games are so core to the DNA of Game Infinite that it does feel, I do feel a little bad not having a top 10 list, but I just didn't get to play enough indie games to make a top 10 list. Now, that's not to say that there aren't some indie games on this list, because I do think that the few indie games I did get to play and try that came out this year were absolutely fantastic. So I don't want to like dismiss indie. I wanted to point out that this was the first year that I've truly merged my indie and AAA bent list that I've always done into just one top 10 list, and I threw out a bunch of honorable mentions. Number 10 squeaked in at literally in December, in like the last few weeks of December, where I honestly almost slept on this game, and that is Super Mario Brothers Wonder. I really just didn't think I was going to play it. I was one of those where it was another 2D Mario game, and that was really my initial impressions of it. It's just like, oh yeah, I've played a million of those since I was a kid. I just really didn't need another one. But the biggest reason I almost completely passed it is because of my personal opinion on the state of the Nintendo Switch. The Nintendo Switch is so held back, so asthmatic. It does not work in 2023, in my humble opinion. I think it was a huge mistake that Nintendo did not update the Nintendo Switch 2-3 years ago. When they came out with the OLED model, the fact that they didn't really update the processor or add just 4K upscaling for TVs, the fact that it took years for it to get Bluetooth audio, it is so behind the times that, in my opinion, it's actually kind of ruined some really good games. For example, last year, I was so incredibly excited for the Kirby game. It looked amazing. It was going to be so cool. I love Kirby. But the Switch just holds games back. And we're seeing some AAA ports that are just getting destroyed critically because they look terrible. So I have not really played much of my Switch in almost a year and a half. This was the first game I'd played since last year, or I should say 2022, because we're into 2024 now. But I just, so many, this is one of those peer pressure games. So many outlets were praising Super Mario Wonder. It was nominated for Game of the Year at the Game Awards, and I was like, okay, this game has got to be really good to get as much praise as it's getting. And to be totally honest, this was one of those games where I was just talked into trying it because I had already written off the Switch, and I really just wasn't interested in another 2D. Now, if they had made Super Mario Brothers Odyssey 2, I would have been all for that. But a 2D Mario game was just not what I wanted, and I didn't really want to play the Switch anymore. But I was wrong, and I'll admit it. I love this game. It was truly amazing just being able to experience the unique novelty of how they approach this game. Incredible how such an old franchise with a tried and true model delivered something new and fresh. Super Mario Wonder is not just another 2D Mario game, and I was very impressed at the new powers, the new world. Overall, it was just a fun and amazing experience, and it squeaks in at the bottom, but it really is amazing game, and it beat out. I had to have like 3 or 4 other games in my top 10 spot that this bumped out. So that just goes to show that it squeaked in, but it had to fight over several other games to get that last spot. Number 9, Street Fighter 6. This was another one that I didn't really have high expectations. I'm not a huge fighting game person. I like them. I'm not like super passionate about them. Street Fighter was one that I never really got into or played before. Obviously, I'm familiar with the franchise. I've played it a little bit. I played a little bit of 5 and 4, but it was just one of those things where it's never been a really big franchise for me. But Street Fighter 6 just had a lot of attention, and it was just something that looked really cool, and it was something fun to play when it came out. And I tried it, and I was I really did like it. It was just a lot of fun. They introduced a lot of novelty to it. They have classic and modern control schemes depending on your preference. So if you're not like a super in-depth fighting game gamer, you can get into this. It's very approachable with the modern play style, which is what I tried off first because it's just a little bit simpler if you're not like really into hardcore fighting games. The modern gameplay I thought was fun. They also brought in a new mode where you can actually create your own custom character and go on a story mode in addition to just the regular fighting. And that really appealed to me. I liked the variety of gameplay options that it offered. You didn't have to just play online. You could play solo. You could do all these different just kind of quick battles. But then it also had a story mode with your own characters. And I recently just got back into it with the new Spy Family crossover event that they did. It's been a lot of fun. My only complaint for Street Fighter 6 was I did feel like the graphical fidelity was a little weak for a current gen title running on the Series X. There's sometimes where it's not as pretty as I think it could be. Some of the hair and facial physics, but it's a minor critique. Overall, this isn't meant to be a graphical powerhouse. It's a small critique that every now and then I feel like it could be a little bit prettier than it is on running on modern hardware. But that was just a that was a minor critique. Overall, I love the characters. I love the combat. I love the story and the setting. It was just a lot of fun. And if you only have like 20 minutes or a half hour to sit down and play, it can be a lot of fun. Coming in at number 8 is Hogwarts Legacy. And this is a game that I really struggled with its placement because it's one of those games where there are some parts of it that are just fantastic. And I put in the article that Hogwarts Legacy, even though I only put it at 8 on this list, it could have been Game of the Year 2023. And I don't want to start, because this list is meant to be a celebration, and I don't want to start off with a critique, but I think it's important to realize that, in my opinion, this could have been a 10 out of 10 title. It could have been a Game of the Year contender. And if they had changed the thing that I criticized about this game, I feel like it would have been Game of the Year, and it lost 7 places on this list because of one mistake. But I don't want that mistake to take away from how much fun and good this game is. It really is one of those games where it's an 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10 fantastic experience worthy of a top 10 list. I just know that there's this one thing that could have made it so much better. Again, I don't want to focus too much on the negative, and I'm going to get into what makes this game great before I kind of explain what that thing is that I think it's missing. This game is a beautiful Hogwarts simulator. The world that they built, where you can go around, explore these classrooms and this world and fly and just experience Harry Potter's universe, it's incredible. The combat is so good. It's actually one of the best magic-based combat systems that I've ever played. It's just phenomenally executed, and the fact that it sold incredibly well, got great reviews, and people liked it, really does speak to how good this game is. My only critique was when you get past the beautiful world and the incredible Harry Potter Hogwarts simulator that this game is, they made a mistake. And the fact is the characters and the story, in my opinion, it can be a little boring. we're into January. This game came out a little less than a year ago, and I don't remember a single character's name. I really don't. I don't remember any of the characters, and the problem is that you spend 90% of the game alone. You're going on these long solo missions, you're on these things. The main character is a protagonist that really just spends a lot of its time on their adventure by themselves. And I put this in the article, was they made a beautiful Harry Potter Call of Duty when they could have made Harry Potter Mass Effect. And what I meant by that was if they had given us just 3 or 4 really interesting side characters that were meant to be like your protagonist's best friends, and they went with you on all these adventures, talking and in dialogue, and you built a relationship with them, sort of how Mass Effect works. And I know that's kind of an unfair comparison because I feel like anyone who knows me, anyone who knows anything about me and my gaming preferences, I've often said Mass Effect is the pinnacle of video games. Like, it is perfection. It is like the best video game series ever made. So maybe it's unfair to compare it to that, but I'm just like, if I didn't spend all these hours just roaming caves, going on these magic adventures by myself, what's so great about Harry Potter are Harry's friends. You know, Hermione and Ron make a lot of what Harry Potter is the adventures that the three of them go on together. And the other part that makes the universe so great are all the professors. In Hogwarts Legacy, all but one or two of the professors are super forgettable, and the friend characters are also just super shallow and plain. This is a lot of negative for a top 10 list, but it's just one of those things where, like, if they had made this more than a really good magic combat and Hogwarts exploration simulator, which is amazing, but the story part, the narrative part's what's missing. And this could have been going from 8 down to 1 if they had fixed that. It's still worth your time. It's still amazing. It's still an incredible game. It's just, I needed to point out the fact that they lost 7 spots because of that narrative mistake. And that's just my opinion. Number 7 is kind of an unusual pick, and it's Honkai Starrail. This is one that, again, people who know me and my gaming preferences will be surprised that this one's on my list. And I put in the article that every year a game comes out that kind of just violates my rules of what games I like, my personal preferences, and it's a game that on paper is not one I should have enjoyed. And this year, I feel like it's doubly so because I'm being a little unfair to another game, which I'll get to. There's another game that came out this year that I think a lot of people will be mad how I put it on this list and how I treat it, because the reason I didn't really appeal to that game should apply to this one too, but this one is, so I'll explain later. But essentially, this game would normally be a skip for me because, for one simple reason, and it might be an unfair reason that anyone watching may not like or agree with me, but I really don't like turn-based games. I don't like turn-based combat. I find it immersion breaking. I don't like it. I feel like turn-based combat exacerbates the problem of repetitiveness in a game. So in my article, I compared it to Spider-Man 2, where you fight the same. Nothing against Spider-Man 2, but Spider-Man 2 has actually a pretty decent size of a pretty decent list of enemy types, and there's different factions, so like no critique there. But after 25 hours, there's only, like, if I'm fighting the same 15, 20 different bad guys, it still feels repetitive. But because it's so fluid and there's different combos you can do and all of this different stuff, because it's real-time combat, it obscures how repetitive that game is. When you're on wave 57 of the same group of bad guys that you've been playing for 20 hours, it takes real good skill on the developer's part to hide the repetitive nature of that combat. And I feel like that's incredibly difficult to do with turn-based combat. Turn-based combat really highlights repetitive combat. When you have a boss that's going to take 87 attacks to take their health, and you got 3 moves, it's watching the same animation over and over. And I just don't really understand why people love turn-based combat so much, because the amount of games that I've enjoyed that's had it is very, very short. So for whatever reason, this game somehow breaks my personal preference. The turn-based combat is very simple, and there doesn't seem to be a huge variety of, like, at least I didn't play countless dozens of hours of the game. I played enough of it to feel like I had a score and a review and enough for this list. But I feel like it was one of those things where it just was still fun. The animations and the attacks were so cool that it was okay watching them 100 times. The characters were interesting. The world was really cool, and I loved the anime sci-fi setting. That it was just a fantastic experience. Moving on to number 6 is one that is interesting because this year we had several follow-ups to previous Game of the Year winners, and this was one of them. It's not a true follow-up in that Forza Motorsport. Forza has two sub-series, and we gave Horizon 5 our Game of the year that it came out, because it was a fantastic, phenomenal experience that elevated it above a racing game. And I was interested to see whether or not Motorsport was going to do that again here. And the thing about it is that the reason they have two sub-series is because in racing, there is two huge kind of categories of how you approach racing games. And then there's two terms. It's arcade and simulation. And for me personally, I prefer arcade because arcade is meant to be fun. Arcade focuses on feeling fast, feeling like you're a rocket on wheels. Those types of games typically have like nitro boosts and crazy drifting and all this other stuff. And it's also meant to make the cars feel a little bit more floaty. With simulation games, they're not typically my cup of tea. I don't usually prefer simulation. I've played simulation racers before, but they're so focused on realism that, in my opinion, sometimes that takes away from the fun. The cars don't feel as fast as they do in arcade games, even though, because like in a simulation, 80 miles an hour doesn't feel as fast as you might think it does. And it's interesting to see how much heavier the cars are, how hard it is to turn. Because the fact is in real life, it's kind of hard to drift around a turn at 100 miles an hour. In arcade games, that's a lot easier to do. And sometimes it's just flicking a trigger or hitting a button right, and you can drift around like crazy. But Motorsport is very different in how it plays for those if you're not used to simulation game. But I was still going to I was so impressed by Horizon 5 that I was willing to step outside my comfort zone and play Motorsport and try the more simulation version. And it definitely felt weird at first. The cars feel heavy, the cars feel slow. How you just taking a turn is hard because it's meant to simulate real life. And in my everyday life, I'm not turning at anything more than 10, 15 miles an hour. So trying to take a turn at 80 is way harder than racing games have taught me my whole life. But what's interesting about it is once you kind of stick with it a little bit to it, it's incredible. It's so beautiful. The cars are so fun, and you can get the hang of it and slowly just get better at real life driving at speeds that we don't get to do every day. Overall, it was just a fantastic experience. Forza Motorsport really was a mature racing experience, but I think it was actually enhanced by the fact that another racing game came out that filled both sides of the fence, both niches that I needed. And number 5 is one that I feel is way under the radar. Not a lot of people played it, but it is just so good. And it's because it's the complete polar opposite of Forza Motorsport, and that is Hot Wheels Unleashed 2 Turbocharged. I got into playing the first Hot Wheels game last year, and I played it so much. It's just so much fun. This is if Forza Motorsport is the grown-up dad racing game, this is just the unchecked, wild, crazy cousin that they're both fantastic for opposite reasons, and that's why I put them at 6 and 5, is because you could easily flip-flop them depending on your preference. They're completely opposite types of racing games, and don't let the somewhat cartoon Hot Wheels name discourage you. This is not just some low-level brand cash grab game, which I think scares away some people. They see a popular brand, it is a toy brand. And toy brands don't always necessarily yield great entertainment media. um, but this is one of those things where the physics are fun. There's dozens and dozens of cars to choose from. There's countless tracks. You can edit the tracks. The quality of content is very, very high, and it's not even a full price title. This is one of those things where Forza Motorsport made me think. I had to plan, I had to learn, I had to strategize. With Hot Wheels, sometimes after see, for those of you all don't know, I'm a dad, I work a full-time job. This is by far not my main gig. Sometimes I just don't have a lot of time to play or a lot of energy left over at the end of the day to play some of these very technically demanding games. And sometimes you just need 20-30 minutes of brainless fun. And that's what this game is. It's just relaxing to just be able to boost every 3-4 seconds, to be able to take a turn at ridiculous physics breaking speeds. And it's just a lot of fun. And it's also fun to learn how to break the physics too, because even though it's an arcade game, there's still physics you can play around with. Some of the fun things I love doing with this series is trying to pull off crazy like jumps or moves that the developers didn't really intend to, like jump the track and skip ahead. They tightened that up a little bit in 2. It was way worse in 1. I could really cheat the tracks a lot more in 1, but 2 is just a lot of fun. And what I would say is do not let the toy brand of this, or the fact that this is not a game necessarily just for your 7-year-old nephew. This is not a game just for casuals. This is one where you could be a hardcore gamer, you could be a grown man like me and love this game because it has a lot of quality and a lot of people slept on it this year. This is one of the most underrated games on this list. You definitely need to check it out. Coming in at number 4 is something that I'm very excited about, because this is the first time, I believe off the top of my head, this is the first time that one of our indie game trailer project participants, one of our GI friends, one of the people who participated in our indie game project. So I'm going to give a quick segue of what that is. So over the last year and a half, 2 years, we've been getting into supporting indie games on YouTube. If you check out our YouTube, you'll find that there are dozens of trailers and gameplay and demo and developer interviews. We've been building this list of indie developers that we've been monitoring and checking out and just following their games. Sometimes it's just playing their games on our GI Plays series, or sometimes it's showing the actual trailers. Last year in 2023, we did our first ever like indie game trailer showcase, and we did Infinite Summer 2023, where we showed off a bunch of trailers and gameplay. Indie games are a big part of our DNA at Game Infinite. And what's super exciting about this is that this is the first time where one of those games, since we've started doing this, since we started really with our new push for supporting indie games, this is the first time a game came out, released. There are literally dozens in the pipeline that are releasing in 2024, 2025 that we're looking forward to. One of these games that we put on our list, we talked to the developers a little bit. We had a GI Plays. This is the first game to come out in this where they made it onto our top 10 list. That's awesome. The fact that we were able to get to know these developers a little bit, talk to them, get some stuff, get their press kits, show off their trailers, show off some gameplay before it launched. It was just amazing. And what's important to know about that is that participation in no way like dictates whether or not they're going to get on the list or not. If the game's great, it's on here. That the GI Friends and the Indie Trailer Project and our Indie Game Roundup series, all of that, none of it's paid. They don't pay us to promote them. This is just us supporting indie games. And this is the first indie game that we've been supporting and following that's released that was just so good, and it made it onto this list. So I'm really excited about it. It's a Game Infinite first. Number 4 is Eternights. Eternights is not a perfect game. In fact, sometimes I'll admit it's a little weird. It's a little quirky. I think that's the best word that I can come up with to describe it is quirky. Is that it's odd. It's tonally odd sometimes. It gets really serious and then super goofy, and it's just an unusual game with an unusual sense of humor, and just it's interesting. But what I think a lot of outlets failed to realize is I think I got a little overlooked by a lot of gaming community outlets and news outlets was I think it got a little overlooked because I don't think people realized how important this game is. See, if you came across the trailer, if you watch our trailer, you can watch our trailer on our YouTube channel. Is you might think that this was maybe a double A or medium sized game. I put this in the article. It's like every year there's always like a half dozen of these anime games that come out. They're like medium sized budgets. They're not full triple A where everyone plays them, but they're not indie. They're just like these medium games. There's a lot of them. And I feel like we get half a dozen or more every year of these anime games. And sometimes they're not based off an actual anime, they're just anime style. And some of them are really good, some of them are just kind of niche, but kind of looks like that. If you see the trailer, it just looks like another one of those. And it could just be easily buried by that. Once you realize that this was a indie solo project, I think your jaw will be where mine was. It's just like this game does not look like it was made by one person or one main person as a debut indie. Like this is one of those games that I think is way more important than people realize because it's proving what small to solo teams are capable of. We're seeing these full 3D games with 3D environments, 3D characters, beautifully rendered characters, really like the characters are really well done and just fun, fluid combat and just impressive visuals and this is a fully voice acted game. It's just incredible and it raises my standard of what I expect indie games can be. This year there was a lot of argument with the Game Awards of like what is an indie game? And the reason is because one of the nominees looks like the traditional mental image of an indie game, but was being made by a team that was owned and funded by a large corporation, and it wasn't really indie. And I feel like this game kind of gets the opposite effect where this game doesn't really look indie. So like people like overlook it as I'm like, no, you don't understand. This isn't a double A game made by 20 people. This is an indie game. People need to realize just how impressive this game is. When you play it, I don't think anyone would guess that it was made by a small solo team like this. Quite frankly, I put this in the article. This type of game spoils me. Knowing as many developers as I do, I have incredible empathy for how hard development is. I have patience when it comes to delays. I know it's hard to build games, and I'm not putting down any game project. But it's games like this that give me a little bit of Tony Stark built this in a cave with a box of scraps attitude towards game development. Where like, and it's not the only game that's done this, but this game gets added to a short list of games where anytime I hear any size development team complain about how hard it is to build a game or specifically hardware, I'm like, they did that with no budget and no team, and it's important to point that out because this game is incredible in a vacuum. It's fun, the characters are fun, the combat's fun, but when you understand just what type of game it really is, it's impressive. Coming in at number 3 is Resident Evil 4. We also gave this our Best Remake award. It was just an incredible experience. 2023 was definitely a year filled with remakes and remasters, just as 2022 was. Lately, in the last couple of years, we've been really spoiled with amazing chances to revisit past amazing games. And sometimes I debate whether or not remakes should be allowed on this list, and I definitely usually don't put remasters on here. But this was a remake to a point where, like, if you look at it compared to the original, it definitely felt like a whole new game. The labor of love is there that validates this whole being a whole new experience. Full transparency, I never played the original back in the day, so for me this was truly a full new experience, and I was blown away, and I finally understood why so many people praise this game for so many years. But for me, it was just incredible. It was high quality, the story is good, and one of the things that you can notice sometimes when you're playing remakes or remasters of games that are a decade plus old is that sometimes, even though they have a fresh coat of paint, even though the graphics are improved, the character models are improved, sometimes they still feel old. Old level design philosophy, old mechanics. Sometimes these games feel like beautiful versions of games made 10, 20 years ago. And sometimes that can take away from the experience, especially if you've never played the game before. But for me, I was impressed that it didn't really feel like that. Yes, it's a pretty linear experience, and there are little parts where I could see the design philosophy from 20 years ago, but it really just didn't distract from the experience. The characters are incredible, the combat's incredible, the the story. My only critique was maybe it was a little too long. The whole plot of the game is a little simple. Uh, you go in, you're trying to rescue the president's daughter, and you fight zombies. Like, it's like she only can get kidnapped again so many times. There's a little bit of repetitiveness, a little bit of too long. I feel like the story could have maybe been a few hours shorter, but that's a minor critique. Ultimately, it's an amazing remake of a well-known, well-popular, one of the greatest games of all time, and it makes it all the way on the top three of this list. It could have easily been number two or number one, but this is one of those years where I do think two and one deserve the place that they're in. But this is an amazing game, and one of the things that I never was really a big Resident Evil person. I don't care too much for the extreme horror focus of 7 and 8. The remakes of 2 and 3 were more my style, and there's something that I particularly don't normally enjoy in sometimes the horror genre is the horror game math that they sometimes do. And I put that in the article. I was like, sometimes there's games where I feel like you have 3 bullets. It takes 5 bullets to kill a zombie, and there are 10 zombies. Survive. And I hate games that make you feel like you have 2 bullets and you have to conserve them, even though it takes 3 bullets to kill a zombie. Like, I hate games that do that. And I felt 2 did that a lot. 3 did not. 4, I feel, finds that balance. You don't ever feel like you can just go run and gun all the time, but you don't feel so strapped for bullets that you just have to melee the whole time. And that's what I don't like in some games, where the game punishes you for wanting to use the gun, so you have to melee and it's slower or boring. This is one of those games where it balances that right. You you have several guns to choose from. You can slowly level it up throughout the game, and you feel like you can shoot the majority of the time, and you're never so strapped for resources that the game feels unfair. But it's not too easy to where it just feels like a third person shooter where you're just, there is a little bit of resource management, a little bit of conservation of ammo to give you a little bit of that survivor horror, but not so much that it punishes you for just wanting to shoot zombies. I feel like 3 did that the best. 3, I really just felt like I could shoot zombies and not worry about ammos too much. 2 was the other end. This is perfectly balanced. So that was my only critique about this genre, and this game handles it perfectly. Additionally, I liked the characters Leon. Leon is, I feel like, it could have been really easy for him to be kind of a shallow action hero, just of that time of just, he's just kind of generic blonde handsome shooter dude like that you get in some of these style of games like the Devil May Cry, just that kind of guy. But he's a little bit more than that. And Ashley so easily could have just been some poorly written, forgettable damsel in distress that contributes nothing to the story other than save me. But that's really not the case. She actually feels like a little bit deeper, likable character. She actually isn't like annoying, or doesn't feel like one long escort mission. She's a really good character, and I think she still works in 2023. Um, I completely see how, despite being just a remake, this game had enough love put into it to qualify for not just a top 10 list, but a top 3 of the year. And I definitely understand it being Game of the Year nominated from a lot of outlets in the Game Awards. Number 3 on our list. Number 2 is Spider-Man 2, and it was honestly the easiest one to put on this list, easiest pick. It was a game that I rolled credits easily on it. I couldn't wait to get to the end. It is a fantastic game. Spider-Man 1, the original, on PS4, received a 10 out of 10 score from Game Infinite all the way back in 2018. I was not the main reviewer on that, but I totally agreed with that score and final review. It's a fantastic game. I played that game to exhaustion. I rolled credits. I nearly 100% of that game. I loved that it raised the standard of superhero games. Like, it makes me incredibly jealous as a Superman fan, die-hard, lifelong Superman fan. I just look at these games and I'm just like, we have this perfect model of what this could be. Give it to us. But I digress. Um, the 2018 version, beautiful, dense, lots of replayability. I played it so much that I just was kind of satisfied. I never played Miles Morales. I never played the PS5 remastered version, so I've had a good 5-year break from Spider-Man. So I think that was enough time for me to just be excited for more. So I had a longer gap than those that played the intermediary versions. So I get why some gamers have maybe unfairly dismissed this game as just more of the same, because maybe you did play those remasters and the Miles Morales expansion game. I think it's a little unfair. It evolves and deepens the combat system. It tells a lengthy and compelling story. The visuals of this game are just downright impressive. And if I had time, if I had more time, if I wasn't working full time, if I wasn't a dad, if I didn't have so many games in my backlog, games that didn't make it onto this list, could have spent just as many hours with the photo, just having thousands of pictures of Spider-Man and its related characters, because I'm a photo mode junkie. I love taking in-game pictures. Ultimately, fantastic story. I don't want to spoil anything about the story. If you haven't played it, go play it. If you like superhero games, if you like Spider-Man, you have to play this. The story was really good. It had a weird... The story has some interesting narrative choices that maybe I critique a little bit. It's not perfect, but no game is. It's one of those where I really did like the story a lot. They improved some of the critiques of the first one. I felt like they did a good job improving the Mary Jane missions. I feel like they balanced perfectly having 2 Spider-Man characters in this game. It doesn't feel like Peter's story with Miles Morales just added on a few times as an extra. They feel balanced. I feel like there's just as much content for both of them. There's just as much costumes. I did feel like how they handle Kraven's story and the kind of the third act twist, there's parts of it that are really, really good, but how they handle Kraven's endings is maybe a little weird. But like, these are all just very minor nitpicks of it. Ultimately, a 10 out of 10 experience. My number 2 pick. I liked the characters, the suits, the combat, the narrative. All in all, it was one of the best games I played of the year. It was one of the games that I just couldn't wait to get back to my PlayStation and try it out and just get to the next story part. It was just phenomenal. Okay. Before getting to my number 1 pick, which I think no one will see coming, because if you think you know what my number 1 pick is, you might be a little disappointed to hear what my first honorable mention is. There's one game that it's the elephant in the room I have to address, because if I didn't address it, the comments would be, where's this game? And my biggest honorable mention is Baldur's Gate 3. And I know some of you might be thinking, that should be your number one. That's the game of the year for so many outlets. And I just have to address some glaring omissions with honorable mentions. I have to start off with that one. Baldur's Gate 3, I totally understand why it is game of the year at so many outlets. The reason I did not put it on my list at all, or at my number one spot where it could have easily fallen, is twofold. Number one, and this is what I mentioned earlier with Honkai Starrail, where it's a little unfair that game made it and this one didn't, when I have the same critique for both. I don't like turn-based games. This is one of those things where, like, this is one of the best turn-based games I've ever played, and it's just so incredible. But I needed to put it as an honorable mention because I realize how important this game is. Because this game stands for something. It launched polished. It launched without ridiculous microtransactions. It wasn't overly monetized. It was complete. This is a game, and this is telling the AAA industry that gamers have high expectations. There were developers who were just like complaining about this game because this is going back to that standard raising, where games that we're going to be able to point to and say, you're complaining about it, whatever, but look, if they could do it, and if they can do it, so can you. And that's this attitude of, like, this game is polished at launch, runs beautifully, it's complete, it's feature rich, it has so much. And when we live in a day where we're more often than not, we're getting more and more games that are launching terribly unfinished. We're getting games that are launching terribly, unacceptably unfinished. We're getting games that are launching just a shell of what they should be for the value that they're charging. We're seeing $70 games launching that are just not worth that price. And we're seeing an industry that's seeing how much they can get away with, seeing how much you can leave off of a game and charge for. I put in the article, it's important from a technical standpoint, and it's important from a real-world consumer practice standpoint. It's a year that this is one of the best years in gaming, but in some ways it was also one of the worst. Like, this is a year that gave us games like The Day Before, the Kong game, the Walking Dead game, the Gollum. Like, these games, you all know what games I'm talking about, where these are games that are launching at high price points that are garbage, and developers are seeing what we can get away with. And we're not too far away from one of the worst games I've personally ever played was Babylon's Fall. That was a $70 full AAA piece of garbage, and gamers are pushing back. We're saying, enough, we demand quality, we demand finished products. And this is a game that is one of the biggest games in terms of just technical size and quality, and somehow it managed to launch polished and reasonably monetized. So it's important. This game is important. I just only played about 4 or 5 hours of it, and after a while I'm just like, I've never played D&D. Maybe like one match in my entire life. I don't really know anything about D&D. It's incredibly dense. It's incredibly detailed turn-based game, so it's like, maybe if it was a little, I don't know. I will maybe go back and try it more, but it's just not my style. This is a game where if you can handle turn-based, if you like fantasy, if you like D&D, or even if you don't, it's just one of those things where you should try it. But I just didn't play enough of it to say it was my game of the year. I didn't play enough of it to put it higher on the list. This is a game where if I had 40 hours in, maybe, but I only got like 4 or 5. I know the game is good. I know the game is a 10 out of 10 experience for most of y'all. And look, you have 30 other top 10 lists to go see them at number 1. I'm going to give you the honorable mention, move on to some more, and I'll share my number 1 pick. Some other honorable mentions. Just going to rattle some off. Starfield, Final Fantasy 16, Need for Speed Unbound, That one technically qualifies for this list because it launched late December 2022. We follow the Game Awards December to December pattern. Exo Primal, that was one game that was way better than it deserved to be. It was fun. It's a crazy dino shooter. Some honorable indie mentions. Games that probably would have been on our top 10 indie list had I played enough indie games to have a top 10 list. Mirror Forge, Planet of Lana, Beyond the Long Night, Cynthia, Hidden in the Moon Shadow. Those are all some just fantastic games that were put on our radar thanks to our indie project. Some of them almost made it onto this list. They're just really, really good. And like I said, if we had done an indie list, they probably would have made it on there. They're all fantastic. Check them out. Let's finally get to number one. Wrap up this video. Way longer than I thought this video was going to be. Number one, I think will surprise some people. It was actually nominated as an indie game of the year at the Game Awards. So it's not as overlooked as it could be, but I think some people will still be a little bit surprised. 2023 is a Game Infinite first because this is the first year, despite the amazing indie games we've played each year, this is the first time where an indie game is going to take our Game of the Year 2023. I've never done that before. I love indie games, but there's always just this really fantastic AAA experience that edges it out and comes out to number one. You know, it's hard to compete with the God of Wars and I've said multiple times in this video, and I've said before, that indie games are a part of our DNA, and we have our multiple projects, our indie game roundups, our indie game trailer project, our developer interviews, all of that. But this is the first time where I'm going to give the big Game of the Year to an indie game. This year, there was an indie game that came along, absolutely blew me away. In past years, I've debated Game of the Year. I always have like a top two that I wrestle with. Last year, I really went back and forth between Lost Ark and God of War Ragnarok. Those were both just top tier games for me, and I wrestled with it, and I finally made a decision in like the last minute. We debated Apex Legends versus Jedi Fallen Order. It was Respawn versus Respawn that year. We just went back and forth. Every year, I always debate the top two, except this year. I knew I was playing the Game of the Year when I was playing it. And it's possibly it's one you never heard of. And the game is Viewfinder. It did receive recognition. I still think it was underrated. I don't think the IGNs and the GameSpots of the world are giving this game its due recognition. I feel like this is one where, yes, it was nominated for Indie Game of the Year at the Game Awards. It didn't win, but this is one that it just has innovation and novelty that something that really stands out to me is when a game does something I've never seen before. And this game, essentially the premise is somewhat hard to explain, so thankfully we got video and you'll see, but this game plays with perspective. It actually somewhat reminds me a little bit of Superliminal. We gave that Indie Game of the year it came out. I want to say that was 2 years ago. I thought it was actually, when I first saw the reveal for it, I thought it was a sequel to that. But once I noticed that they weren't doing the same thing, it was different. In this game, you have a viewfinder or a camera or a Polaroid or whatever, some image that when you hold up to the game world can become the game world. It can change the art style of the game world. If you have a watercolor photo, all of a sudden a part of the game world, and you're solving puzzles by altering the game world, and it's just so unique. Cool. I don't understand why more people aren't just praising this game. I don't want to diminish the praise that it has gotten and the recognition it has gotten. It deserves all of it, but I think it deserves 10 times more. It's unique, it's novel, it's incredible, the story's really good. It's just and it's a genre that I love. These are what I like to call Portal likes. It's a phrase I've coined to describe this walking simulator puzzle genre where you're trapped in a lab using some weird mechanic to like, it reminds me of that. There's other games that are in that. Superliminal was one. There's a few others that are like this, but it just reminds me of that. It's a Portal like. It obviously has nothing to do with portals, but that genre is one of my favorite. And the fact that you were getting one of those that's excellent quality, and they came up with a mechanic that is completely unique, and I've never seen anyone do this. It's really, really cool, and I can't sing its praises enough. I watch a lot of YouTubers and podcasters talking about games. I've only heard like one bring this up in this topic of the year of games. They didn't like the ending. I thought the ending was, maybe it was a little subtle, a little simple, a little, it's not this big climactic. You're not shooting a portal at the moon and sucking the evil robot into space, but it's just kind of elegant. I don't want to spoil it, but it's just kind of a beautiful, quiet little ending, and it's good. It doesn't need this big climax because the mechanic, the world, and the novelty is beautiful. So, are there other games that I completely understand why they're Game of the Year? Baldur's Gate 3. I never played Zelda, but I know a lot of people are going to be asking me, what about Zelda? There are definitely some games that came out this year that are worthy of the title, but my title, the game that I'm going to give it to, is Viewfinder. It's insane. If you made it through this whole video, I want to say thank you. I really enjoyed this one. This one is one that I look forward to all year long. If you've been enjoying the Best of 2023 event, hope you stay for more. We're doing a lot of cool things. If you don't know what the Best of 2023 event is, check us out on Instagram and Twitter. We've been doing a whole bunch of community polls showcasing various cosplay and fan art, letting the community vote on their favorites, and also sharing some of our Best of 2023 game picks, things like ongoing game and remakes and a few others. Check it out. And of course, last but not least, check out Ice-T Aesthetics. Use our code GameInfinite to save a little bit on some cool anime and nerdy merch. Support that small business. They're awesome. Check them out. And I'll see you guys on the next Game Infinite video.
I love the chase and the hunt, and I set the pace when I'm running. I always take what I want and I always give it 100. Don't need a bank, no I'm funded. Play the game like it's nothing. I'm always thankful for something. Don't take for granted, stay humble. Now wake up! It's time to look at the enemy.